What up, meatheads? It's Travis, aka American Butcher, and this is the long-awaited Meat Block Podcast. And I've gotten a lot of messages about people asking where the podcast is and what's up with this weird hiatus in the summer and inconsistency in episodes. And well, there's many factors. Being on the American team, it's taken a lot, and I need to focus on being the best I can on the team. My work is also taking me in that direction, and trying to find balance between my happiness at home, which I am very happy, and my unhappiness or life at work, and my balance with being on, the team. And then just with stress, and I'm working on this first remodel of my house so I could, do another remodel of my house. There's just a lot of factors going on. And also I'm just like, I was just getting burnt out, and this was one thing that unfortunately I thought I could put to the side while I gathered myself mentally, and because I didn't want to put out something half-assed, and I didn't want to be forced to put out something because people have been asking where's the show. And honestly, with everything going on, when I find myself in the hours of the night like I am now, where I could put out the show, I'm just so fucking tired and just want to sleep. And I know that's not what, I don't know. That's just the truth. I'm just like, when I relax, I don't know, just bummed. But it ebbs and flows, such as my story with depression. And if you're new to the show and you're wondering, I thought this was about the meat industry. It is, in a vague, roundabout way. But this episode is an in-depth about mental health, and explicitly like suicide prevention. It's something that is very real in the restaurant industry. It's something that's very real in the meat industry, in the butcher industry, in the slaughterhouse industry. I have dealt with it with co-workers. I've had my bouts with stress. So in this episode, it's going to be a round table discussion led by the one, the only, the handsome, when he's shaven, Bryan Mayer. Don't grow your beard back. You have a jaw that should be clean shaven, or a little scruffy at least. Anyway, this round table is led by Bryan Mayer. Sitting in on it is Danny Johnson, the captain, the one, the only, the Grand Master Butcher of the American United States team, as well as Patrick Mulvaney, the owner of B&L in beautiful Sacramento, California. And if you don't know, Sacramento is going to be the host city of the 2020 World Butchers Challenge. Anyway, Patrick has developed the I Got Your Back program, which is a great program to allow people to check in on their staff, or allow staff to check in on themselves, to really let people know the mood and, what you're dealing with. And, it could apply in restaurants, it could apply in butcher shops, slaughterhouses, really anywhere.
Wonderful. Everybody looks so happy. Is that because it's a really long day, or is everybody just tired of waiting for my late ass? Sorry.
Good cutting enhances the quality of good meat. Poor cutting results in an inferior piece of meat, regardless of quality.
No worries.
Cool. Well, I'm excited, happy. Everybody could make it. Maybe not happy or excited that we have to have this conversation, but yeah. So I guess, this whole sort of thing came about Travis and I have talked a lot about, mental health, certainly mental health in the meat industry. We've certainly talked in our own private discussions about our own struggles with mental health and mental illness and all of that. I don't know, there was a confluence of a few things. Obviously, there was this new Dave Chappelle stand-up comedy special. About the first 10 minutes of it focused on Anthony Bourdain and his suicide, and a dear friend of Chappelle's who he lost touch with, but then reconnected with, and sort of comparing and contrasting these two lives, one which ended and one didn't. And on the surface, seemingly one looked amazing, and on the surface, the other didn't. And I watched it, and it brought up a lot of just a lot of feelings, obviously, certainly of my own struggles with mental health, brought up, just all sorts of topics, race, privilege, everything that I think all kind of plays into this. I got involved in a conversation online, as some of us do sometimes, and maybe a little bit too involved, as happens every now and then, and people felt very strongly about it. So I don't know, I felt like maybe it was a good time to talk about it as it relates to the meat world, maybe, and as it relates to the butchery world. And Patrick, you and I have had a chance to meet. We met at a James Beard boot camp a while ago, and obviously I've followed all the work that you've done in terms of bringing awareness to what's going on in our kitchens and with our front of house and our back of house, and how this is sort of a silent epidemic. And I think that's why it's been allowed to grow so much. And so first off, thank you for doing all that you've done to bring awareness and really start at the top, which is go to healthcare providers, right? The people that are supposed to help us take care of ourselves, and kind of challenge them. So I don't know, I'll start with that, and let's have a conversation and see what we can do. And maybe we can help some folks in the meat industry. Maybe we can help some folk in the greater food community at large, and maybe we can help each other. Yeah.
Yeah. So Bryan, you were there, obviously. So Bryan, we had already, but you other guys, we had already been talking here in Sacramento about mental health. We had four suicides, and then Noah Zonka was a chef who had been going off the deep end, and probably less than a month before Bryan and I met, I'd sent his mom a note 2 years ago to say, "Where's Noah?" Hoping that she'd say, "He's with me in Wisconsin. He's good, right? He's in rehab. He's going to come back to California someday." He says to say hello. What his mom said was, "I don't know. He's homeless, and we think he's at the river, and we're not sure. And if you see him, tell him I love him, and I'll let you know." So 3 weeks before I met Bryan, his mom sent a note to say that he'd been found at the river. He'd been there for 2 weeks, dead. So we were planning on all this stuff and starting to move on it. And as I was getting on the plane to go to the boot camp, my wife called in as I was boarding and said, "Bourdain's dead, and you're going to find out when you get off the plane." So for me, it was the perfect place to be that weekend, right? In a room, in a space with 15 chefs and not much connection with the outside world to talk about who we were and what we're doing and where it's going. And so what's happened since then now is, with the help, like you said, so 10 days after I got back, we had 15 chefs around the table with mental health care people from around Sacramento telling us this is what mental health care is, and here's how you guys can work on it. In October, we had Innovation Learning Network. We had 150 healthcare innovation officers in Sacramento who said, "This conference wants to leave a scar on Sacramento. And the scar we want to leave is improved mental health services for hospitality people." And so they came up with "I Got Your Back," right, which is what we've been doing here for the last 7 months. And now it's been piloting in over a dozen restaurants in Sacramento. And it's easy, right? It's at its base, it is saying it's okay not to be okay, and to reduce the stigma and increase conversation so that we can have better outcomes. And then, Bryan, I think that you're right that it's something we haven't talked about, and it's something that's prevalent. But when you look at Bourdain's book, and for us, some people, they said, well, it's just a book about the fucked up lifestyle in the kitchen. And I always looked at it as, it's a book. It was the first book that said, you are valued and what you do is good and honorable work, and you should be proud of yourselves. And so we looked at it that way. And as we started to bring out the discussion, what we found is, and he also, Bourdain, saying you're misfits, right? And what I found is that we're not as misfits as we think, right? As people start saying, Dave Chappelle or anybody, my uncle, my aunt, my nephew, butchers, nurses, doctors, office workers, right? All sorts of people that want to get involved. So it's a great time for that communication. I think that the butcher, if I look at butchers like the barber, right, as a solid member of the community, it's good. This is something that's good for your world, for sure, but also the tentacles that you guys have are good to make this better as well.
Yeah, that's great, man. I think the word that stands out the most for me, and I don't know about Danny or Travis or Tia, is the word stigma, right? Like that stigma attached to it. Because what does mental illness look like, right? What does depression look like? It looks like anything, right? There's no, other than sometimes if you're very close to somebody and you can sense it or pick up on it and see their demeanor or something like that, depression looks like the person sitting next to you that's smiling, trying very hard to smile, probably, but that stigma attached to coming out and saying that you're hurting and you need help. I in the meat world, it's obviously a very macho world to some degree, right? And I think that macho-ness is killing us, right? We're hidden even more than chefs in the back of house, right? We're in these big brick buildings, in cold rooms, really in not the greatest environments out of all the not great environments in the food world, right? It's like no sunlight, right? It's cold, and so there's not a lot of avenues for help, which I think is why what you're doing is so important. And why I hope that, again, us in the butcher community can learn from what you're doing.
I just got to stop you there, Brian. Sure. So there are avenues for help, but we don't know what they are, right? Sure. And so what we've been doing for the last year is saying, what are those avenues? Just like I said at Glenwood, right? There's something called mental health out there, and we're going to find out what it is, and we're going to find out how to spread it, right? So we don't have answers that are perfect, and we have some answers that are okay, and hopefully we'll get to answers that are good. But that key is starting the conversation. It starts with you or Danny or whoever saying it's okay not to be okay and opening the conversation. And when we started doing that, when I came back and they saw how broken up I was about Noah, right? And we saw how hurt everybody in the community was about Bourdain. I didn't think about the fucking florist being hurt by some guy that was on TV taking his own life, but it was true, right? And as we started talking about that and we opened it up, my wife was brilliant in saying we need to make sure this is a conversation for all of us, that we keep going. And she did it with her box, right, of 4 colors and mental health checking. Put in a little card that says, I'm happy, I'm neutral, I'm sad, I'm fucked up. And then at the lineup, you just say, here's where we're at. Here's the temperature of the restaurant. And most people are good. 2 people are blue. So we know 2 of us are fucked up today. What are you going to do about it, right? How are you going to help your teammates? And then if you're one of the blues, how do you want to be helped? And how are you going to use that thought today for next week when you're better to help yourself? But then, and then I started to figure out how to help people more, and I still didn't really know whether it worked or it didn't until December. Right, in December we have 4 people die by suicide. Right, so 2 former employees, someone who was best man at the wedding of the bartender that just served him, and Cassie, who was a waiter. So Cassie died by suicide on Christmas, and when we brought everyone back together to bring them and talk as a group about this, to say, we want everyone to have the same information and share your feelings. I saw our staff leaning in and using the techniques and resources and asking for resources that they didn't know, because we had created that openness for conversation here in the restaurant.
That's
and
awesome.
That's when I knew that what I had hoped for in Glenwood was going to come true.
Yeah, that's great. So I sent around an article that you were in that kind of highlighted all the work that you were doing. And one of the things that stood out was somebody that works for you, Danny, and talked about the positive atmosphere at Taylor's, and one of the reasons why I'm working there so much. And so as a business owner as well, right? What are what kind of steps do you take in terms of empowering your employees to help one another, making a safe space for people to come forward and talk about issues, accountability, all those sorts of things? Do you employ any sort of specific tactics to that? Or is it just kind of like you have a very close team and everybody kind of knows what everybody's temperature is?
We have a pretty tight team. This you hit it on the head with the term stigma. That goes back. Patrick and I were just having a conversation, and I told him a story about my father having an depressive episode in 1984, and it was a suicidal situation. He was the Rock, and it wasn't. There was a stigma with it, and I was 20 years old, and I was like, I had a hard time talking about it. As I've evolved as a human being, mental health affected me personally in many different ways. And so as a business owner, it's more like just taking a pulse on how everybody is. Now with more awareness and all this, in light of all the stuff that's coming out, it's almost a reverse don't ask, don't tell. Now it's a please ask, please tell. You know?
Yeah.
Please ask me how I'm doing. And the person asking is like, please tell me how you're doing. I want to know how you are today, if you're willing to share. If not, the box idea works good. We haven't, we've worked on that. We're having a staff meeting tomorrow.
So this is it, man. Look at this. This is what my wife did. It's a Mighty League tee box with shit cut out of it and colored cards. Here we go.
It's pretty simple.
Totally simple. And Brian, I think that one of the keys is Casey, who was super brave in sharing her story. Fuck, she did not want to do that, and fuck, that is not her personality.
No.
For Danny to tell his story, for you to tell your story, that's what does it, to create that safe space, right? Some people have said that it's scary. Maybe it is, right? But the truth, and it also makes you vulnerable, which maybe it does, but the truth is that vulnerability is what gives you strength and imprimatur and lets other people follow you and fall into that piece, right? So for me, being vulnerable has done nothing but make it easier for this to go forward.
Yeah. And
I think it's the talking about it. So I have a young man who started with us in May, and we're training him to be a butcher. Pretty quiet, couldn't get him to talk much, and he listening to Paul and I talk in the morning, talk about family issues, whatever, just having conversations, we're setting things up, and he realized how open we were, and we just really held nothing back. And he's on the slicer, and he stops, and he looks at me, and he goes, I've had depression issues. And I'm like, I said, okay, you want to talk about it? And he goes, yes. And he starts telling us about his issues. And he goes, you guys are cool, man. You're not judging. And I go, there's no judging in this. And that, it goes to the stigma. And if someone can get into an environment, we can educate people to say, hey, man, mental illness is not unlike having diabetes or tuberculosis or any kind of disease. It's a disease. It's just a disease that some people hold it within and they don't articulate it.
Yeah. Hey, Travis, How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So you've worked in a lot of different places. You and I have had the very, very similar paths, right? We've been on farms and we've been on slaughterhouses. We've been in boutique shops, commodity, and all that sort of thing. I'm wondering, have you been in all those different environments? What your take is? Like, what have you seen in terms of openness?
Well, when I work,
tactics, things like that.
when I worked in like large scale slaughter and production cutting, there was a huge opiate crisis. We'd have people show up dope sick and falling asleep on the rail, but we didn't really have. No one really talked about it. It's more like people just kept to themselves in that kind of environment. And at the time, I was doing a lot of the killing, and Pat just I'm diagnosed bipolar, manic depressive, whatever. I've been institutionalized because of it, and also have a past with cocaine addiction. So I didn't talk about my situation at all or anything I was struggling because everyone was so introverted there in that place. At the slaughter side of the industry. Also, there was high overturn, so you really couldn't get a good rapport with people because people were rotating in and out on a weekly basis, pretty much. Temple Grandin recommends that you rotate positions, so one person just is doing slaughter the entire time, so they don't get desensitized to life and death. And I think that's good advice. I think that someone who may be just seeing the, manufacturing of death over and over again, who is suffering from something, may not understand the severities. Then when I moved into the boutique side, high-end retail in LA, I felt like I still didn't talk about myself except for with a select few people, because I felt like everyone was oversharing their emotions, and I just found it off-putting for me personally. And then moving on in my career where I work now, it's a really healthy work environment. That being said, everyone I've worked with is happy, but I'm not going to say his name, but some guy was missing days here and there, and it was just the tail signs of like a manic episode where he would come in and it was like, well, I didn't have gas, I didn't have this, and I couldn't call you. And it's like, but you texted me. So he did have, and it was just excuses and just like high energy. And he left. Like, we gave him the option of just, you could stay here and work if you just commit to these hours and try to figure out what's going on. And he didn't want to. Like 3 months later, he hung himself. But I don't know. Did that answer your question, Brian?
Yeah, not the way I wanted it to end. Yeah. I think
it's important too. Like, so suicide is easy, right? Because you have a count. Yeah. But I think it's important in the discussion to talk about anxiety, depression, substance use, psychosis, bipolar, and suicidal ideation. But to have that all open and for conversations. Because one, maybe I'm not suicidal, but I am depressed. I'm going to come into the conversation and improve myself. But two, maybe I am suicidal, but I'm not going to talk to you about it, right? Like that kid who said, yeah, I'm not ready to talk about it. But would he talk about being anxious or depressed, right? Or, hey, I haven't slept in 3 days. Well, yeah, I know you're on a tooth. Of course you haven't slept in 3 days. But if they're going to talk about that anxiety, then it's going to get them into the conversation, right? And with the hope that you get them to tomorrow. But it's so as much as the people who have died hurt me, there was this kid here who was a knucklehead and did nothing good except get yelled at, which he did very well. He took a mountain of shit. It was amazing. And after a year and a half, he clicked. And all of a sudden, he knew his shit. His Mies was killer. He was cleaning walk-ins. He knew where stuff was. He was investigating things to try new dishes. He was working. He stopped. He was running the line at night. He stopped drinking and smoking as much. He had a girlfriend. He was fucking great. And then I think he got afraid, right? Because he'd never had a good life. And in 6 weeks, he fell off. And there was no way to get him, right? Where are you? Where are you? Call him, go to his apartment, nothing. And 2 months ago, a friend of mine who's a UPS driver said, "Hey, Chef, I saw a guy in a B&L jacket over on 4th and B. Young kid, hasn't been out on the street that long, but he's definitely living there. But he had a jacket. Did someone lose a jacket?" I'm like, "What does he look like?" And he told me, and it was him, right? So it's those ones. It's suicide for sure that you want to prevent, but it's all the ones in the middle too, right? Because you can't. Because at some point, someone's going to make up their mind and say, "This pain is too much, and I'm going to end it." And there's nothing we can do. We can have hope for sure, right? But no expectations. But it's that JoJo hurts just as much as Noah does, right? That right now tonight there's some kid sleeping out, some 23-year-old kid sleeping in a bush somewhere.
Yeah,
right? That we couldn't figure out how to help.
Yeah, it's weird because I know with because me and Bryan Mayer became friends more online, and then before we met in person, and I feel like I'm more comfortable telling or having a conversation with an anonymous person, almost like with Bryan. Before we met, we talked about issues and things like that, or on my podcast I've talked about it because I think I don't see the listener, or I don't, where if I still get weird having a face-to-face conversation even with my wife about struggles personally. There's some days where I get embarrassed, even I have to go to the pharmacy to pick up something because it's just I don't know where that stigma comes from. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a fear of being judged.
Yeah,
we're in a judgmental society, and I have a daughter that suffers from bad depression, and she's being treated for it right now. She has since she was a teenager, and it boils down to she has a chemical imbalance. She understands it, but talking to her today about it, she's like, it's a fear of being judged. Mm-hmm. You want to, when you're around high-functioning individuals, you look at someone else you're judging, and you're going, that person has their shit together. But you really haven't pulled back the layers, and you don't know.
Not me.
No, and everybody has a story. And if you can get, and it's easy to say, you get past that, and you have conversations, and you find out, hey, man, everybody's story is real parallel, real similar.
Yeah. It's really interesting that you say that, Danny, because to me, I've always looked at it, and clearly I don't have a background in psychology. My dad was a psychoanalyst, and my stepmom is. So I've had a heavy dose of it in my life, maybe too much. But you brought up something really interesting, which is the chemical part of it, right? The chemical imbalance. And then there's the environmental part of it, right? Which might be a trigger, right? Which is, for me, is most often the trigger. And so I guess my question is what have you guys found successful in, I'm not going to say eliminating triggers because that can't happen, right? It's just not possible. But I guess addressing them or talking to your staff or your team members or creating an environment in which those things don't exist. And again, I go back to the idea of, again, especially in the butcher world, this very macho attitude, this chest thumping, I'm tough and I'm going to work hurt, whether it's physically or mentally. And that's it. And then I'm going to drink it off, or I'm going to down a bunch of pills, and I'm going to come back the next day and do it again. What's worked? What's been successful?
For me personally, it's I used to work 16-hour days when I was single and love it and brag about it and all that stuff. And then later in my life, it started causing me stress. and I was working for this NFL kicker. I was his butcher. It's weird, but I was asking him, like, because he's a punter for Tampa Bay, and I was like, no one likes seeing you. When you come on the field, no one's excited that Tampa Bay's punting. And then I was like, how do you deal with that? And he said, I just have to really just compartmentalize what is absolutely in my control. And that's how I view work. Because if a smoker's down or delivery's late, or if carcasses come in at a high temp, I can't overly stress or lose sleep about that, and just hope that my insurance or the company's insurance will cover it if it's something like that. I can't stress if people are no call, no shows, because that has nothing to do with it. Sucks and affects my day and it'll add stress, but I can't worry about things like that. And that's what I found has helped me personally.
But here's what we do, and I don't know about butchers, but I guess this is probably true, but in the kitchen we fail all the time, right? Every day. Shit goes wrong. Shit's down. And we know it, right? Because we have to look at people and see and have them say this soup sucked or my steak wasn't hot or whatever, right? And that happens. And so I tell the kids when we do whole hogs and they butcher them for the first time, and I tell them, they're like, I don't know how to do this, chef. I was like, that's all right. No one else does either, right? Just do the best you can. I'll show you how I do it, right? And I'm certainly not as good as you guys, but still, those other people don't know it. But if you acknowledge the mistakes, then that's what's made it easier to say, yeah, I did pretty good, but I would think if I was cutting a carcass part and I missed muscles and then I had shit that I'd have to put into a grind pile, right? That would be too much. But it's admitting that you're not perfect, right? It's that piece to say, I'm doing every day. I wake up and do the best I can, right? I don't always do good. Some days it's pretty shitty, but we do the best we can, right? And that ability from you as the leader, like Danny said, creates the conversation. So this kid who's slicing stuff on us all of a sudden can say, yeah, I felt that too, right? What do you want to do about it? And then after that, you have to have a mountain of patience, or I have to have a mountain of patience sometimes to go through that conversation, right? To get to that point. So when someone has a trigger, to be able to say, hey, let's go outside. Here's something that's happening. This is not your regular self. This isn't good, but you know what? Let's not talk about you're not, let's go to the point, right? Let's talk about what's really happening, right? And having to have that ability. So we had two girls, two servers, right, who one did something shitty and I called her boss on it, and then they tried to hash it out, and all of a sudden they're fighting. And they came in and they were like, well, she disrespected me. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I get disrespected every day. Shut the fuck up. But I don't say that anymore. So I said, okay, let's start with this. 85% of the time you guys get together, you get along great, right? So let's concentrate on that. And then here, you missed that. And here, you felt like I called you out because she missed that. And so that's not good. But let's let that settle, right? Let's concentrate on the 80% and then move forward. We got to a point, they were like, yes, we're good. And then 15 minutes later, as one was leaving, they came back into this room to say, I tried to hug her and she wouldn't hug me back. And then you're just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, but so I didn't, right? Totally uncharacteristic. I said, again, let's just talk about it, right? It's something that we're going to need to work out, and you guys have a relationship. You have to figure out how to have that piece. So my COO, who's brilliant at this stuff too, said the other day, so Chef, this isn't making a consomme, right? You don't end up with a clear broth and you serve it and it's done. This is work, and it's an ongoing thing, right? So you have to enter into the conversation with the willingness to continue the conversation. But I can tell you that there's benefits, right? So now from those two servers, that's a different conversation, right? Now, instead of the old days of drink more, drink less, get back on the line, don't be a pussy, right? Now, you can say, hey, you need the day off, that's cool, right? You can take that day off, but here's where you're going to have to perform moving forward, So instead of being angry, I'm still angry. Instead of exposing my anger, we can talk about the performance, right? So it's not that I don't like the person. It's not, there was a kid here who was coming out, right? And he was like, well, shit, I have to tell you, I'm gay. Like, why? I'm married. I don't care. I'm also a lot older than you. Like, but I realized that he needed to say that, right? So I had to share that. But it's that ongoing process to create that conversation. So there's two things. One is that helps me because now I can start talking about people who are working for me in a performance-based manner, and it makes it a little easier for me to deal with all that shit. And then two, the hope is that as everybody enters into the conversation, you're not the only one having that conversation, right? So Bryan, after we left, over the course of the next 6 months, right, people were just calling me. I have someone in my office. I need help. I don't know where do I go? And it was text messages, blah, blah, blah. Now there's a website, right? And so then it got easier because people could find out where to get a little bit of help. Not perfect, right? There's nothing about 12 steps on there. There's nothing about what happened. But people are getting better. So last Thursday, someone came in and said, Chef, I had someone come in. Someone came to talk to me. And he said, I'm thinking of committing suicide. I don't have a plan. And I said, in my mind, I was like, did you ask him if he has a method? And he said, but I did ask him if he has means. And he said, yeah, I got a bunch of guns. And I was like, dude, let's get the guns out, right? We got people with lockers here, or maybe he's got family. He was like, yep, we're already working on that. I'm going over this afternoon, and here's where I'm going, but how do I move forward, right? So those people now have those resources, right? Because he said because the fear is, there's two pieces to fear. One is that people are going to judge you, and two is that you're never going to fix it, right? Like if you're on, when I was a 22-year-old line cook and I was just getting buried, what was the fear? The fear that I wasn't good enough, and that I was never going to get out of that. I was going to feel like that forever, right? Neither of those things were true, but at that time they were for sure true for me. And this is kind of like an ongoing process of saying, no, it's okay. It's going to get better, right? We get you to tomorrow, right? That's what we got to do. And sometimes, and when you get them to a place where they're stable enough, then you get to say, maybe, you know what, maybe you do suck. You should just work in a chicken nugget factory.
Yeah, I used to drive to work with my brother, and it would be a very horrible day ahead of us that we just knew on our way to work. And he would just look over at me and say, there will be a time when we are driving back the other direction. This is not your life for the next 12 hours. I found that hopeful, talking about being buried and whatnot.
So I use the baseball analogy a lot. The difference between being a superstar and being mediocre is one hit. So the superstar is 3 for 10. He bats 300 in his career, probably a Hall of Fame career. This guy's going to make millions. Guy goes 2 for 10 in his career. He bats 200, and he's just a role player. And I'll use that, and I'll tell him, I go, you need one extra hit. Just one hit every 10 times, and you're a superstar. Yeah. And people who understand baseball will respond to it. I'm trying to figure out a soccer analogy because it doesn't work with soccer players.
They'll both go over my head. So,
and then the other thing that I've been, and you guys already know my mantra on this, especially with the millennials, is I tell them to get off social media, take a break, because I don't want to say it's directly responsible for some of this mental health crisis, but I do believe it has a large impact, because as humans, you like to compare yourselves to what other people are doing. And Patrick and I had this conversation a little bit earlier too. Somebody gets press and it's like, hey man, how come I didn't get that press? And there's enough of the pie to go around for everybody. But social media, sometimes it blows my mind.
Yeah.
That's a whole different topic.
It definitely has the ability to amplify things, right? I mean, the those feelings, those thoughts, all those things are innate. You have those things, and then you hop on to social media, a very carefully curated platform for people's lives, and I think that can certainly aggravate the situation for sure.
I see it that people post something looking to get a dopamine response from the likes, and then something gets like some form of criticism, and then people only focus on the negative on social media. That's why the rule: never read your comments. Because it's like there'll be like 100 things that people like praising you, and one person said, well, that could have been done a little better, and all you want to do is rip that person's head off, I guess. But
and actually, Travis, you nailed it right there with the dopamine response, and the fact that people are looking at it and they're going, man, I'm liked, people genuinely like me, but if they see something negative, it just sends them right into a tailspin.
Yeah.
And
so
that's kind of sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead, finish. Sorry.
No, that's just kind of the direction that I try to nudge some of the younger people that are really into it. And I go, take a break, man. Take 3 or 4 days off. See how you feel. And, pick up a book, walk around town, and just do something different besides being on your device.
Engage with somebody. Although I will say that, the flip side to that would be, it is a great way for people to connect with each other, right? Like, so as Travis mentioned, he and I had a friendship relationship via, social media and through, those means before we ever met, physically. I'm making this sound like some sort of relationship.
You guys, this is like a movie of the week type thing.
That's really weird. Anyway, we'll talk more about that later. He's
met my wife.
That's just going in a whole other direction. But there can be good aspects of it too, right? Like, that the feel, like, especially if you're feeling disconnected, the maybe the power of anonymity when you're talking to people about certain issues that you're possibly not ready to talk about. For me, I think growing up around it and being so involved in it, and it's so a part of my family life, I tended to pull back and not want to share, which obviously made things a lot worse. And then, like I have a tendency to do, I went to the complete opposite extreme, and maybe tended to overshare to people, and would get corrected quite often for doing so. But I guess accountability, right? I think that's a really big thing in all of this. And I think Patrick was hitting on some of that when you were talking about the conflict resolution and how you guys as business owners can create this environment where in the past, be like, all right, that's great, shut up, get back on the line, right? Like, you head down, back on the table, right? Where now there's an environment, and we've talked about this now, and it's out in the open, right? Where I just can't walk away from you knowing what's going on, right? I have a responsibility as a business owner. I have a responsibility as a friend. I have a responsibility as a human being to see if I can help you resolve whatever it is that you're going through. So I think that's really commendable, because it's one thing to say you do these things, and it's obviously a different thing altogether to actually do them and to enact them in your business. Yeah. Well, Travis.
Well, I just wanted to say that, like, 90% of suicides are planned within 5 minutes of them happening. And then, like, I think it's like 90% of people who survive their first suicide attempt won't try it again. That they call it like secondhand suicide, the when it's spare the moment. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to distract people or to get people within those 5 minutes, like you said. Asking someone if they had a plan is huge, because if they've gotten that far, then it's like, all right, then we got to take this seriously. If you have firearms, what's the next step? So I don't know. I just feel like people should know those statistics to know to, because just figure out a way to distract someone for 5 minutes. That would be great.
And it creates a positive vector, right? So people say it's like suicides. If people commit suicide, then more people commit suicides, and they call it a negative vector, and it drags in. But when you're doing stuff like this that says it's okay not to be okay, hey, here's the number that you can call or text, and there's someone there. Or are you thinking about committing suicide? Yes. Do you have a plan? Okay, I have a responsibility to not let you do that. That becomes a positive vector. So just like the bad shit infects everybody, the good shit infects things too, right? And so there's power that you don't even realize. And maybe you'll save one person, or maybe you won't save them, right? I mean, that's the hardest part, right? Is that you're not going to save them all. But to know that putting out, maybe I've been in California too long, right? You're putting out positive energy, and that spreads.
That's not a New York thing.
Yeah, that's not that. We didn't learn that in Rockaway Beach, but that there is this power in the positive vector.
Yeah,
that changes.
Yeah, I think that I was talking to Danny about like you could tell people like, hey, I'm right here for you. My hand's right here. You could grab it whenever, and then you could actively get to a point where you don't need to say that anymore, but your hand's still there, and they still know. And it's, you may not catch them all, but like if they know they could reach you, that's good. Like,
and for me, I've learned that it's important to check in, right? So I'm not that guy to be, but now I know it's important, right? To check in on fucking John in Denver. Hey, dude, how you doing? Right?
Just being aware.
We're okay.
Being aware. You know,
and when I see, and to your point, Brian, when I see shit on social media, some friends who have restaurants, especially a couple of guys here who have just opened, having a tough time, well, because it's a dumb idea to open a restaurant, right? But when I see they're having a stressful time, just to send them a note, dude, you all right? Here you're at, right? How you doing? Or even, I went down to the river to get fresh fennel seeds because it's that time of year where the fennel is blooming. You just drop, walk into the kitchen and say, here you go, bro. Here's a bag of fennel seeds. How you doing? Right? Look at them and wait until you get that answer. That's really important. Changes things.
See, I think this is really important because what you're talking about is a paradigm shift, right, in the culture of the food business, right? So whether it's a kitchen or a cut room or whatever it is, right? Like
farms, man.
Yeah.
Because I have this conversation with farmers too.
Absolutely. Talk about isolating, right? Talk about being alone, right? And then talk about all the other forces that are enacted upon you, right? So we're talking about a fundamental shift, right? In the way that we approach how we're doing and how we care about each other and we care about our coworkers or our teammates and all that sort of thing, right? The check-in, I think the check-in has pulled me back. I'm hesitant to use that word, but the check-in has pulled me up at some of the lowest points that I've ever been at. And just that random, a text message, right? A phone call, an email, right? Just out of nowhere. So, and it's interesting because a lot of those times when I've received messages like that, these individuals had no way of knowing where I was mentally or, how low or how high I was or anything like that. So the idea of that energy, right? Like be it positive or negative, right? But that energy gets sent out there. It's really, really important. And I think that when individuals like you tap into that and are an example of tapping into that, again, that's that paradigm shift in the industry that we need to see happen. So.
And when we push, so we might look at it as how do we change ourselves in the industry? Here's the cool shit. is that people who are mental health professionals, American Association of Suicidology, National Council for Behavioral Health, Mount Sinai in New York, the head chief medical officer for the state of Mississippi, the head of medicine in Chicago, all 4 major health groups here in Sacramento have all said the same thing you said. That what you're doing is a paradigm shift, because we work in this sandbox that we call mental health, and we want to bring you in to fix you. And when you say to us, we think we have a problem out here, we don't want to come into your sandbox, but we want to know how we can fix ourselves out here. These guys who are huge, they're smart, right? And they have their shit together, but they are in the straight world, right? But those guys are fascinated by the idea of reaching out to us. And so to your point of there's nowhere to go, it's true. We just don't know where to go. And even if we do know where to go, it doesn't always work. But these guys, in the professionals, are all fascinated by this because it's a change for them. They see it as a way to better deliver services. And they see, because everybody loves to talk to people in the food world, that we can be like the likes or whatever, right? That we're a first off person that they can talk to, right? So as we move forward and figure out how, as we're helping ourselves, it's a way for us to ask for help from others that's meaningful. Because for me, I think a big part of it in the restaurant, in the food world, is that we're just concerned about you, right? And we are really good at hospitality, right? Are you on a first date? Are you in a business meeting? Are you, whatever, we're reading people all the time and reacting to them, trying to provide them a hospitable service, right? An exceptional experience. But we never turn that on ourselves, right? And so as we start to say, let's look at ourselves. So when I left Glenwood, I didn't think about me. I thought about my crew, right? Like, who's going to do this on my crew? And fuck, they need help. And a month or two in, I was like, maybe this is about me. And I was like, fuck, no, not about me. And I realized it was, right? Then I had to act on it, right? In order to help them, or to keep people, help people on the floor, help people in the industry, you need to acknowledge that this was for me too.
Yeah.
I think we have an opportunity, as what we're doing, partnering with Patrick and getting involved in his I Got Your Back program and bringing it in and kind of getting behind this cause and having these conversations in the butcher space and in the farmer space and just in the human space. We have an opportunity, like you're saying, to shift the conversation. And people who are listening to this, it's like, hey man, these guys aren't afraid to go out, put themselves out there and talk about this. And that's what we got to do, is just keep pounding on that drum. The World Butcher Council, and I talked to New Zealand today, Ashley and Rod, and they are totally behind this. They think it's a brilliant idea to get involved on a worldwide basis into the mental health space and make that, if you will, the purpose behind our passion. And I think that this is just the beginning of some really good conversations.
One other question that I have is drugs and alcohol, right? Obviously, if you are in a mental state already, and then you add those things to it, clearly it's going to amplify whatever state that you're in. How do you guys go about combating that? How do you talk to your staff about that? What do you do for folks, right? Like, because punishment just seems like the wrong thing to do, right? Like, we've all had an employee, or we've all been close to somebody. Somebody very, very close to me that I cared about very much, wound up, I would say, committing suicide through a drug overdose. Maybe accidental. I'm really never sure what that's supposed to mean, accidental. But he meant a lot to me, and I went to bat for him all the time. And I would do it again and again and again, knowing what I know now. And I probably didn't go about it the right way when I look back on it. Not that I enabled him to do things, because I certainly was pretty hard on him. But I don't think I had the proper tools, and I don't think I was properly equipped to help somebody in the way that I thought I could. Is there anything that you guys do in your businesses when you identify somebody like that?
Yeah, we think about it. My wife's really good at saying we're not counselors. We refer people. We get them to places. We say, you're in trouble, I can't help. When people call and say, I have someone who's here, and I have been specifically, as we've been going through this, I am leery of suicide people, and I'm leery of 12-steppers sometimes, although I'm less leery, but they can be pretty bound and determined. This is the path, the only path, and I didn't want to be exclusionary in any way. But there's great value in the 12 steps, and there's great value in the wisdom of what the folks who are doing in mental health is. But I'd say, we're not counselors, and I can't fix you, but I can refer you to or try and get you to a place where there is help, right? It's a super important part to just keep saying that you're not a counselor, right? Mm-hmm. But to say to that person, but you're important to me, and together let's figure this out. And I'm not going to be judgmental about your drinking, right, or drugs or whatever. Although it was funny because someone dropped a bag of meth on the floor this morning, so that caused a little kerfuffle in the pantry. Like, who was that? I don't know. Let's see who's most active. Has he been drinking coffee?
Some pretty telltale signs.
Yeah, but to get them help without listening, without judgment, right? And then two, in addition to not knowing what resources are available, you also have to be patient to wait until the person is ready for help. Right?
That's almost exactly the model that we use. Call them in and say, hey, man, you're in a little bit of a crisis. So here's where you can get help. But you're not in a position to be a counselor. You just can be aware of the fact that they're in a crisis.
Yeah.
We just dealt with this. Got an employee that was in jail. Thought this guy, he no call, no show, couldn't get hold of him for 3 days. Found out he was in jail, did some research. He was freaked out when he got out. He thought he was going to get fired. Like, no, you're not going to get fired. I said, there's a lot of people who've been in jail. But you can't do that again. Mm-hmm. And we're working with him now. And this guy, in the past 10 days, it's been a 180 on how he is as an employee. Because he realizes that, hey, someone does care about him. And he does have value. And that's what I told him. I go, look, man, this is a fork in the road moment in your life. You can take the right fork or the left fork. Mm-hmm. And one of those forks is going to be bad. It's up to you to figure out which one. So that's, and again, it's almost like an individual basis sometimes, because what works for one person doesn't for the other. But with substance abuse, it's always, hey, here's the options. It just can't happen here because you're putting people in jeopardy when you're working there.
That's for me where you can just say, here's the performance, right? This is what we need, right? I need you to be, what that station is like on a busy night. I need you to be able to do that. And I know you can do that, but there's things getting in your way that are preventing you from doing that. So you need to make a decision. We can work with you together to get some of those obstacles out of the way or find other ways of help. And you need to have a ton of patience, right? Yeah. I mean, a ton of patience on your side. And like my buddy says, he's like, when I call him, and he is a 12-stepper, and when I call him sometimes for sponsorships, there are people looking for help. And he says, dude, just can't have any expectations, right? He said, always have hope, but just don't have any expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
powerful. One thing that I've found that helpful is knowing what your health care will provide. Because I think a lot of people are scared of, they're wanting help, but I think a lot of people don't get help in America because they're scared of getting into debt. And what's scarier is their addiction or not having money for their addiction or whatever. So like if you're an employer and you notice a problem and then you just brush up, like I worked at a place that didn't cover drug rehab, but they covered inpatient mental disorders. And then working with doctors, you could genuinely get things written to be one thing and they treat both things. But
that's a really great point, Travis. And so, right, more stigmas, right? So getting help and going to a therapist, right? Everybody's maybe got the idea of the $400 an hour, shrink, on the Upper West Side or something, or equivalent in, wherever city or suburb you're in or something like that. And it's just not the case. Any good therapist that cares will not turn a patient down. And it doesn't have to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist, right? It can be a clinical social worker. It can be a counselor, right? Like the ability to listen and to hear somebody and to help them isn't relegated to just a few professions. Now, obviously, people have to be trained in all of that, but you're right. A lot of people have healthcare. More people have healthcare now than ever before. So, absolutely, protect your healthcare provider. Do you guys list in your businesses places where people can go, where they can call? In terms of outreach and resources in that way?
Yeah, Sacramento, there's a place called, well, it's all on the website, but we have it up on the wall too. So the suicide line, the crisis hotline, which we don't list as the suicide line, crisis line, text line, which is the same as 741, but the number on the website gets you a faster answer. We also have, because we're here in Sacramento, that's for anybody. Then here in Sacramento, it's a place called Hope, that will talk to you and triage you. And if you're not in imminent danger of yourself, but you're in crisis, they'll send a cab to you and bring you to their safe house for 23 hours, tea and cookies, soft music, and tell you about what resources are available. Everybody here has Kaiser, so we can funnel them right into Kaiser, or people that have insurance here have Kaiser. People here that don't have insurance, there's something called SAC covered, which is part of California covered. And they have navigators, which specifically speaks to your issue. And I don't know that they're everywhere, but they're great because you can call and say, I have insurance and I have a problem and I don't know how to deal with it. And they'll assign you a caseworker who walks you through your system. Or if you don't have any coverage, will walk you through the public system to try and get you to some help. So that's always available. That's available on the boards here for everybody.
Yeah.
To look at.
And that's great. And people should really know that these organizations and these institutions are really set up to help you. They really are. They're not going to judge you or anything like that.
And there's tons of, around the country too, there's NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. And there are our chapter here in California, and obviously being in the capital is super strong. And it's maybe better here in California because we spend $2.4 billion a year on mental health issues. But I've had good results from people around the country calling and looking for resources and have referred them to people who are in charge of their local NAMIs, their state NAMIs, because it's a membership driven, if you will. It's like people who have mental health challenges or have been affected by them. And the grassroots have gotten together to say, essentially, are having this conversation, right? There's a problem. We don't know how to fix it. What did you do?
Gotcha. So I guess I have one more question. And I don't necessarily expect an answer or anything like that because I don't have an answer for it. But we'll keep it in the vein of comedy since we're talking about Chappelle. And last night I watched Bill Burr's new special, and apparently I'm a big pussy. But how do we're four men, we're sitting here, we're talking about this, right? whether we're enlightened and all that, I don't know. But I guess very simply, how do we get more men to talk about this stuff? How do we get more men to feel open to go to each other or to go to somebody else even? Talk about how they're feeling.
I think it's about being just open. If people hear you having conversations, like I used the example of Paul and I at work, it brought in other people into that conversation. Yeah. You know, our employees know that before we open, that it's usually a pretty open forum, and we kind of have a pulse on everybody and kind of see where they are. And you know, in the meat department particularly, it's all guys. And I just had a guy who left me after 20 years, and part of his problem is he wouldn't open up, and he still won't open up, and he does have mental health issues. Yeah. So it's that just being open about it. You're gonna connect with some people, and some people you're just not going to make the connection. And I guess that's the $60 million question right there. Is how do you get that person that doesn't open up to open up?
Yeah. And
so we have a bartender who is closed up and has his challenges, but is the guy that everyone talks to. He is the guy who has gun safes and has on more than one occasion gotten guns from people who work with us at times when it would be inappropriate for them to have it in there. But he's always been like, mental health, bullshit. You know, well, you're just trying to create something, and that's not really true. And over the last month, he said, how come you don't talk to me about it? It's like, well, because you said it's bullshit. He said, do you know how much time I spend back by the dumpster counseling these guys and smoking cigarettes and telling them what to do and blah, blah. It's like, yes, dude, I do know that you're doing that. And I appreciate you. I applaud you for it. It's part of your value here, because Lord knows your bar is a mess. But you didn't want to talk about it. So I wasn't going to talk about it, right? That's fine. Right? But I know that you're doing good work. My daughter, so Sarah, was best friends with Cassie, right? They had brunch on Sunday, 2 days before Christmas. Everything was good. Hey, we're going to see you on Friday. That's great. Cassie had fucking letters for all her friends. Right? There's no way she didn't know on Sunday when she was eating with Sarah that this was going to happen. And Sarah doesn't want to talk about it, right? And it's like, okay, honey, right? Then I check in every once in a while just to say, how you feeling? Do you want to talk about it? No, I'm good, right? You know, NBC Nightly News was here a couple of weeks ago, and they said, can we talk to some folks who had these experiences? I said, sure. Hey, Sarah, do you want to talk to these guys about this? No, I'm fine. Thank you very much. All right, cool. Right? Yeah. Just got to be ready, and also with the Dan Mitchell reference, right? Realize that there's many ways to attack the issue, right? You can do it by being a prick smoking cigarettes in the back, right? Or you can do it by being Yana, the doula, who wants to be your mother and talk to you about, you know, smooth waves and giving birth in bathtubs or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But as long as you're going towards that place where you're connecting with people, that's what's important.
Yeah. And by no means do I mean to lessen the impact of mental issues amongst women, but clearly
they fucking talk a lot.
Well, clearly men, right? Yeah, I feel again. I'm grateful. I'm blessed. I'm privileged that I came from a situation. It came from, you know, I had a father that was very involved in the men's movement back in the 70s and 80s, and you know, I feel like I learned a great deal from him about being open and being able to communicate how I'm feeling. And I would say that is not the experience of many men out there. So to create an avenue where we can, again, I would like to go back to that, the idea that our macho-ness is killing us, right? We're too proud, we're too strong to talk about. Well, and how sad we are.
Talking about machismo and working in, when I worked slaughter and stuff is just, I guess, like when I look back on what I used to do, I realized I was a shitty person. Not because of my work, just because I would hear people, put down people for not being masculine or not doing something, essentially being called pussies or essentially whatever. And even if I didn't, wasn't the one doing it, and maybe I did, that me not saying anything certainly led to the quote unquote toxic masculinity in the meat and slaughter industry. And I think that one way to curb that, and what I actively do now, is I just don't tolerate in my work environment that kind of unnecessary chest thumping, I guess. Yeah. To try to just be like, hey man, you don't have to call that guy the F word because he didn't do something correctly, or like, yeah.
And the impact of that happening over and over and over again, and to somebody that's already not feeling the way that they want to feel, pretty detrimental. So,
and there's lots of other stressors too, right? So over the, like, was it a month ago or two, we put up on boards in the back the ice shit. Like here's what you say if they come to your door. Don't make sure you have that card. Make sure it's signed by someone. Like all this stuff, like, motherfucker. So a bunch of people, a lot of the staff came up to me and just pointed at the ice stuff and said, Chef, you want to talk about mental health, right? This is what drives me. I can't go to my church. I'm afraid to take my kids to school. How do I go shopping? That's fucking up my mental health too. So it's a specific example that I wish was different, and we can certainly support in any way we can. But it's also a good reminder that what triggers us doesn't trigger other people, and to be like he said, be non-judgmental, right? Because something that might not trigger me might send you over the edge.
Absolutely, pain is experienced differently, right? And so the example that you just gave, very, very different. And so, yeah. All right. Well, we're past the hour. I don't know if that's our cutoff time or anything like that. Travis, is that our cutoff time?
I don't know. I just talked last time until our conversation lost steam. So. Yeah. I don't know. I would just say that also, mental health is ongoing. If you take meds, like I don't go to a therapist, but I see my doctor like once every 2 months because I have to get medication adjusted. And just, once you're prescribed something that works for your particular situation, things may change. So always be vigilant with that, I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to say that, I'm on social media. Travis, you're on social media. Danny, you are not. That's okay. I think we should set up like a fake Danny page or something.
Yeah.
Travis is trying to facilitate something.
The real Danny.
I'm trying to get a bunch of candid shots though.
Come up with like a really like a persona. But I would, and Patrick, you're on there too, and then obviously you're doing all the great work that you're doing. But I've learned a lot since that time where I attempted to be a counselor or whatever. But I don't know, just reach out. If you're not feeling good, reach out. Reach out to your friends, reach out to one of us, and just ask for help. I know that's a really hard thing to do, and depression works in different ways in everybody. But that's what I would say.
Yeah. I would also give the advice not to say you can relate to people's personal experiences, because I found I hated that when people would say that to me. That just because everyone experiences stuff completely differently. But what you can say is that I am here for you and I can listen.
And I would put in your phone 1-800-273-8255, which is the crisis line. And anytime you think someone needs help or talk, what I do now, and I've done this half dozen times, is take their phone and put the number in. say, hey, you want to talk to somebody? We can talk together. You can just practice. You can do whatever you want. Sometimes they talk, sometimes they don't. And then when they're done, I just say, save it. Call it boning knife. Call it box. Call it grapefruit. Doesn't matter, but you'll know if you're in a place where you need to talk to someone, and no one's available, that there's someone on the other end of the line that could be able to help you.
There's a tremendous amount of resources out there. It's just basically don't be afraid to ask, that is the key, is getting people to ask. We can't be afraid to ask if we see something, and people in crisis can't be afraid to ask for help. And I guess that's the stigma we're trying to break.
Is there a way to end this uplifting or on a lighter note?
The Bill Burr special was amazing. I don't know. Did you watch it, Travis, last night?
I got 7 minutes left.
Okay. And I feel like a big giant pussy, but I laughed for an hour and a half. So. I don't know. Thanks everybody for taking the time to chat. I don't know if Tia's on the line or not.
Nicole
I
is.
am. Thank you guys.
Yeah. And
it's Nicole acting as Tia. I can set a profile up for Danny too and act as him too.
I think Nicole, we can get some of that stuff up on the Butcher Guild website because there's not a whole lot of info there, right? There's nothing up on the site at all about this sort of stuff.
Not on the Butcher Guild website. No. We are sharing it out to all of our social media channels, though.
Cool.
I was hoping Patrick could repeat that phone number.
Yep.
273-8255.
1-800-273-8255.
Okay, I got it.
And then the text. So text, you can text HOPE to 741-741 or to 916-668-4226.
Okay, 2916.
916-668-4226.
Okay.
And then another easy way to do it is to go to igotyourback.info. And when that web page opens up on your screen, at the top it says In the Weeds, Get Help. And both those numbers are the first things you'll see.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, for having this discussion tonight. I think it's really important for everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for facilitating it and letting us talk. And thank you guys. Patrick, thank you, man. It's really awesome what you're doing. And it's going to be, I don't know, the basis for what we try to do for butchers now. So thanks.
Cool.
Patrick, nice meeting you. And I hope we get to meet in Sacramento during Farm to Fork. And
sure.
Have a lighter conversation. And guess what? We did meet at the Farm to Fork Festival, and it was great. It was delightful. At the bridge dinner, I had many fancy meats, many fancy salad, and, of course, many fancy drinks. I want to thank Danny, Patrick, Bryan Mayer, and Nicole, and Tia. And just know, if you're in that situation where you need to reach out to somebody, do. And if you feel that someone you know is hurting or struggling, reach out to them. Talk to them. Worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to have an awkward, or the best thing that's going to happen is you're going to have an awkward conversation. The worst thing that's going to happen is you can lose that person if you don't do anything. So embrace the awkwardness. Talk. If you see someone feeling down or acting differently than normal, just be like, check in. I have this coworker, and I check within. I check in on him so often that it is off-putting. But I'm there for you, Mr. Brewer. I want to say Thanks again for everybody. If you want to support the show, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. It truly helps. And until next time, keep your knives sharp and live in the margin.